Okay, let's use the table saw to put a bevel on this picture frame. A bevel in 4 perfectly mitered corners. At the miter saw, swing your table around to 45 degrees and make a test cut. Here, a test cut just means that you're cutting the very end of your material so that if you have to adjust your angle and cut again, you've still got enough material. Also take note of how I'm making the cut with my bevel side up. You can be up or down. Just know that the picture frame's not going to come together if you make this cut rotated 90 degrees to this configuration. And then check the angle. Use a protractor and set it to exactly 45 degrees, and then slide your material in and confirm that the gap against the base of the protractor and the gap against the arm of the protractor both disappear. If your angle is not a clean 45 degrees, go back and reset the miter saw. It's not worth cutting until you're dead on. Now let's determine how long each of these rails needs to be so that we can cut the other 45. I'm going to measure this edge that runs from the sharp corner to the sharp corner, the long side of the miter, and find it to be 8.5 inches. And because I made a 3D model, I've got high confidence that 8.5 inches is going to allow everything else about my picture frame to still function, namely that the glass is still going to drop into the rabbet. So I'm going to hook my tape measure onto the one mitered corner I've got and then mark 8.5 inches. And I'm going to indicate with my pencil more than just the dimension. I'm also going to put a mark that shows the 45-degree angle sloping away from my mark. I don't want to get confused and cut this angle in the wrong direction. Okay, now that I've got some confidence in my ability to cut a 45 degree, I'm going to extend that confidence to the other 45 degree angle that I'm able to cut on the miter saw. I want to be able to trust that I can use both because the rabbet that I've cut through my material makes it a little floppy in one configuration. See how hard it is to keep this material from falling over? I want to do all my cuts on the biggest flat surface that I've got, and that's going to force me to swing my table from one 45 to the other as I put these miters on. And as we get ready to cut the first miter, check out the hold down stick. It's got 2 feet on one side and 1 foot on the other. Sometimes that single foot is exactly what you need to land on a thin surface like we've got here. Great, making the first 2 miter cuts is no big deal. Just make sure they lean in the right direction. And make sure the overall length is as close as you can be to spot on. As you start to make your second piece, that's where things get a tiny bit more fussy. First, swing the table back and get your first angle cut, and then start thinking about that overall length. You really need your second piece to be exactly the same length as your first, and this is extremely difficult to do if you're just cutting to a pencil mark. Rather, you should use your first piece as a guide. Put it physically on top of your second piece and line up the 2 cut edges and feel with your thumb that there is perfect alignment. The pad of your thumb is amazingly perceptive and will tell you when you have found perfect alignment, better than your eyes and better than a measuring device. Now with the 2 pieces aligned, you've got to move them together until the top piece bumps up against the flat of the blade, and then a tiny bit more so that when the blade comes down, it cuts through both pieces, ensuring that they're going to be the same length. Then you've got to get the hold down stick to land on top of both without scooting them left or right. And finally, turn the saw on and cut through both, shaving off a bit of the top and cutting through the bottom. A good cut will feel perfect on the left side of the stack and perfect on the right. If both halves of your picture frame are not the same length, then your mitered corners are not going to close up tight when you glue them together. Cutting the shorter 2 pieces is an identical process, except that the overall length is 6.5 inches. And that's so short that you cannot cut it with your hands as the hold down mechanism. You can use your hands to line up for the cut, but then you've got to get a hold down stick so that you are clear of the blade when it turns on. Okay, now the bevel, and bevels can be tricky cuts. Let's start with the critical detail that when you lean the table saw, the blade always has to lean away from the rip fence. So far so good, but when we bring our material up to the rip fence, notice how the rabbets, which we've already cut away, create this void that makes the material fall over. Imagine how this problem's going to get even worse as I actually cut the bevel, leaving me with only this tiny little ridge to rest upon. This is not stable. Don't cut it this way. Not only is it liable to fall away from the rip fence, it's likely going to fall into this hole beyond the riving knife. So let's find a way to better support our material. What we're going to make is a little sled. So look in the scrap bin and find a stick that you can rip down in the table saw to be a little bigger than the size of your rabbet. And bigger just means that the bottom of your workpiece is floating a little bit above the table and that the edge of your workpiece is not hard up against the rip fence. Then get yourself a push stick with a heel on it. The heel of the push stick is going to drop down and cover both your workpiece and the sled, pushing them along together in unison. Take a moment with your rip fence further away from the blade to give a dry run of this procedure. You want to develop a bit of confidence pushing everything together before you're pushing it through the spinning blade. Okay, one last check to visualize what we're trying to do. We've angled the blade to put a bevel cut from here to here. We're trying to leave a little flat on the top and a little flat on the inside of the picture frame. It's this surface right here on the 3D model. And we're not going to measure this. You're just going to scoot the rip fence over and look down the edge of your workpiece until you see the blade slicing off the amount of material that feels good to you. Get a featherboard in place to hold your material and your sled against the rip fence. Make sure your material is away from the blade and then power it on. Now you just need your push stick with a heel to push your material and sled through the blade, putting the bevel on your work. Do this for the other 3 pieces and you will have all of your bevels cut. Okay, now the fun, easy, and sometimes messy bit. Get down some brown paper so that it catches your glue and do a dry fit of your picture frame and congratulate yourself when you see it all come together. Or feel that feeling of sinking into a pit of despair because you can't quite tell if it's going to all come together. It's hard to hang on to these 4 wobbly pieces. And if you're noticing that the wood has been burned by the table saw blade and that displeases you, do something about it. It's way easier to sand off those burns now before you glue all your pieces together. Find the orbital sander and check to make sure that you've got 100 grit sandpaper on it. Turn it on and move it back and forth across your burn marks. You want to put a little pressure on, not so much that you totally stop the disc from turning in its slow circle. And if it feels like it's taking forever for the burns to come off, know that sandpaper gets dull and wears out. So put a fresh sheet on and feel the difference. Fresh, sharp sandpaper should take those burns away in short order. So without any glue yet, get them into the picture frame clamp and learn how it works. This strap has these 4 90-degree angle brackets. Wiggle those around your corners and start adjusting the strap until it's a loose fit. Then turn the red handle to apply tension to the strap to get a tight fit. Just a bit of tension because you want to be able to slide your mitered corners along themselves to find the perfect moment where the corners meet. Good. Having achieved a dry fit, take everything out and apply wood glue on every face, spreading it into a thin, even layer, and then load everything back in and apply tension just enough until you see the wood glue ooze out. Adjust any corners that aren't perfectly aligned, and then add a bit more tension to lock everything in place. You should be able to pick up the whole frame now, flip it over to check the back, and then let it dry for at least an hour. And before you walk away, now's your chance to get a damp rag and wipe up that oozing glue. It's so much easier to clean up when it's still wet. Congrats, give that glue time to dry. Next up, we're going to cut the grooves for the splines that will make the corners extra decorative and extra strong.